The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting a fading glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. A warm breeze drifted through the streets, mingling with the sound of crickets and the faint hum of distant cars. It was the kind of evening that felt safe and calm, where families gathered inside, finishing up dinners or winding down for the night. Michael Johnson, a 12-year-old boy with bright eyes and an ever-present smile, walked home alone from basketball practice. His dark curly hair bounced with each step as he clutched a worn basketball under his arm. He was tired but happy, replaying the shots he'd made that day, the thrill of every perfect swoosh still fresh in his mind. In his old, scuffed sneakers, he could almost feel the dreams he carried with him. Dreams of one day making it onto a real team, maybe even playing professionally. Those shoes had seen him through countless games, marking victories, losses, and endless hours of practice on the court. The streetlights flickered on as he walked, casting long shadows across the pavement. Michael felt safe in this neighborhood. He knew every corner, every house, and every friendly face. But tonight, something in the air felt different. A slight chill prickled his skin as he neared the end of his block. He looked up and noticed a police car creeping slowly behind him, its headlights casting an eerie glow on the ground in front of him. At first, he didn't think much of it. This was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where people waved at each other from their porches and exchanged friendly greetings. But when the police car suddenly stopped a few feet away from him, his heart began to beat faster. He clutched his basketball tighter, feeling the rough, worn surface against his fingers. The car door swung open with a loud clunk, and out stepped a tall, broad-shouldered police officer. The man's face was shadowed, his expression hard to read, but his stance was rigid and authoritative. He had the kind of presence that commanded immediate obedience. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" The officer's voice boomed, slicing through the stillness of the street. Michael froze, his heart pounding as he turned to face the officer. He'd heard his parents' warnings about staying calm during interactions with the police, and he tried to recall their advice. They'd told him that even in a safe neighborhood, it was important to be respectful and to avoid sudden movements. He took a deep breath and forced himself to stay composed, even though his hands had begun to tremble. The officer, whose name had agreed Officer Jackson, approached with quick, purposeful strides. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with a square jaw, deep-set eyes, and a scowl that made Michael's stomach turn. His posture radiated authority, and Michael could tell that this was not a man accustomed to being questioned or disobeyed. "What are you doing out here?" Officer Jackson's tone was flat but laced with suspicion. Michael swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just walking home from basketball practice," he said, lifting the basketball slightly as if it could somehow validate his words. "I live just a few blocks away." The officer's gaze flicked down to the ball, but his expression didn't soften. In fact, if anything, he looked more annoyed, as if the sight of the worn-out basketball confirmed some unspoken judgment. "I don't care where you were coming from," Jackson snapped, his voice cold. "Empty your pockets." Michael hesitated, his mind racing. He had nothing to hide. Just a few coins and an old candy wrapper. But something about the officer's demand felt wrong, invasive. His parents had always taught him to comply and be respectful, but they had also told him to trust his instincts. Right now, his instincts screamed that something wasn't right. Still, he reached into his pockets, his fingers shaking as he pulled out the loose change and wrapper, holding them out with trembling hands. The officer didn't even glance at the items in his hand. His eyes were locked on Michael's every movement, watching him like he was some kind of threat. "Turn around," Jackson ordered abruptly. Michael's skin prickled with fear, but he forced himself to follow the command, turning slowly so his back was to the officer. He could feel Jackson's gaze boring into him, and a sense of dread settled over him. Then he heard it, the low, menacing growl of a dog. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw a German shepherd straining at the end of a leash held tightly in Jackson's grip. The dog's eyes were locked onto him, its teeth bared and its muscles tense. Michael's heart raced, his mind filling with panic. He knew police dogs were trained to be disciplined, but this one looked ready to pounce, barely restrained by the officer's grip. Jackson's hand rested heavily on the dog's leash, his eyes narrowing as he studied Michael. "What's in your bag?" he demanded, nodding toward Michael's backpack. The dog lunged forward with a vicious snarl, and Michael's body reacted before his mind could fully process what was happening. He stumbled backward, the basketball slipping from his grasp and bouncing away as he tried to escape the snapping jaws. His legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead, but he pushed himself to run, his feet pounding against the pavement. He could hear the dog's claws scraping against the ground, gaining on him with each passing second. Panic overwhelmed him, his breath coming in ragged gasps, tears stinging his eyes as he ran. He knew he couldn't outrun a trained police dog, but his survival instincts drove him forward, his only thought to get away. Then, through the fog of terror, he heard a voice he recognized. "Stop, Michael." It was his mother's voice, desperate and filled with fear. She had seen the commotion from the window and had rushed outside, her heart pounding as she watched her son being chased down by the police dog. She ran toward them, her hands raised in a plea, her voice breaking as she cried out. "Please, he's just a boy," she shouted, her voice filled with anguish. She waved her arms, trying to get the officer's attention, but Jackson barely glanced in her direction. His focus remained on Michael, his face cold and unyielding, as though he saw nothing but a target. Michael felt the dog's hot breath on his heels, and he stumbled, falling hard onto the pavement. His knees scraped against the rough concrete, and he twisted around, bracing himself as he awaited the impact. He could see the dog's teeth bared, its eyes locked onto him, ready to bite. But then, as if by some miracle, the dog halted, barking furiously but not attacking. Jackson had yanked on the leash just in time, restraining the animal with a frustrated scowl. Michael's mother reached him, dropping to her knees beside him and pulling him into her arms. Her hand shook as she cradled his face, checking him over for any signs of injury. Jackson glared at them, his grip tightening on the leash as he watched them, with an expression of disgust and suspicion. For a moment, it seemed as though he was about to give the dog another command. But then his radio crackled again, and he hesitated, glancing down at the device. The officer took a step back, his gaze still fixed on Michael. "This isn't over," he muttered, his tone laced with an unspoken threat. As he finally retreated, Michael's mother held him close, her hands trembling with a mixture of relief and rage. She whispered comforting words, trying to calm him, but in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. This officer had made a mistake, one that he would soon regret. Because the man he had just threatened was not only a boy. He was the son of a police captain, a man who would not stand by and let this injustice go unanswered. The air inside Michael's home was thick with tension. After the terrifying incident with the police officer, his mother, Karen, had barely let go of him, clutching him tightly, as if her hold could shield him from the memory of what had just happened. Michael's father, Captain James Johnson, arrived home shortly after, and the look on his face when Karen recounted the story was one of shock that quickly turned to anger. Captain Johnson was a respected officer in the police force. Known for his fairness, integrity, and dedication, he had always believed in using his position to protect and serve. It pained him to hear that his son had experienced a side of law enforcement he'd spent his career fighting against. The thought that a fellow officer could have treated his boy like a criminal, without cause or evidence, burned deeply. James sat down beside Michael on the couch, his large hand resting on his son's shoulder, trying to offer comfort and strength. "Son," he said quietly, struggling to keep his voice steady, "I want you to tell me exactly what happened. Don't leave anything out." Michael looked up at his father, his face still pale from the encounter. His hands trembled as he clutched the basketball, his trusted companion, now marked with smudges and scuff marks from where it had hit the pavement. The memory of the dog's snarling face and the officer's cold stare was still vivid in his mind. Taking a deep breath, he began to recount the story, his voice wavering at first, but growing stronger as he continued. "I was walking home from practice, Dad. I was just a few blocks away. And then, this police car pulled up behind me. I thought maybe he was lost or something. But then he got out and yelled at me to stop." James's jaw tightened and his hand instinctively clenched into a fist, but he forced himself to stay calm for his son's sake. He nodded, encouraging Michael to continue. "He asked me what I was doing, and I told him I was just walking home. I even showed him my basketball." Michael's voice grew softer, tinged with a mix of confusion and hurt. "But it's like he didn't believe me. He made me empty my pockets, and he had his dog with him. The dog was growling, Dad. It was so close, and it looked like it wanted to attack." Karen placed a comforting hand on her son's shoulder, her own face etched with worry and sorrow. She could barely contain her anger, but she knew that James needed to hear everything, even if it tore at her heart to see her son so shaken. Michael looked down, his hands twisting together. "Then he told me to turn around. I did what he said, but then he let the dog go. He told it to attack me, Dad. I don't know why. I didn't do anything wrong. I was so scared. I thought it was going to bite me. I tried to run, but I tripped," and his voice trailed off as his eyes welled with tears, the fear of the moment catching up to him. James took a deep, steadying breath, his face a mixture of controlled fury and heartbreak. He pulled Michael into a hug, holding him tightly, as if his embrace could erase the pain and fear his son had felt. Karen watched them, her own eyes filled with tears as she placed a hand on James's shoulder, grounding him, reminding him that they would face this together. After a long moment, James gently released Michael and looked him in the eye. "Listen to me, son. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you hear me? This wasn't your fault." He held Michael's gaze, wanting his son to understand that he was blameless. "That officer, he was wrong. He shouldn't have treated you that way." Karen's voice was soft but firm. "Michael, sweetheart, your father and I will make sure that officer is held accountable. What he did was wrong, and he will face consequences. You're safe now, and we won't let this go." Michael nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes, but the memory still weighed on him, and the fear was hard to shake. He felt small and vulnerable, stripped of the confidence he usually carried. He wanted to believe his parents, to believe that this would all be made right, but a part of him wondered if things could really change. James rose to his feet, his face set with determination. "I'm going to the station," he said, looking at Karen. "I want to find out who this Officer Jackson is and why he felt the need to harass a child. This won't go unaddressed." Karen nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll stay here with Michael. Go, do what you have to." James grabbed his coat, giving Michael a reassuring nod before he walked out the door. The anger simmered beneath his calm exterior, but his training allowed him to keep his focus. He wasn't just a father seeking justice for his son. He was a captain, a man responsible for upholding the values of the police force. And in that moment, he knew that this went beyond a personal vendetta. It was a matter of honor and integrity. As he drove to the station, his mind replayed Michael's words. The image of his son, alone and scared, facing an aggressive dog and an unyielding officer, made his heart ache. He had dedicated his life to building a police force that valued fairness, respect, and compassion, and he couldn't fathom how one of his own could abuse that power so blatantly. When he arrived at the station, James headed straight to his office, where he called up the records for Officer Jackson. It didn't take him long to find Jackson's file, and as he read through it, he noted a pattern that concerned him. There were previous complaints about Jackson's conduct, nothing as severe as this, but enough to suggest a tendency toward aggression, especially in interactions with young men of color. How had this been overlooked? How had Jackson continued to operate without consequences? His blood boiled, but he knew he had to remain professional. He needed to handle this the right way, or it could jeopardize the case against Jackson. He made a few calls, gathering details, and setting up a meeting with his superior officers. He wanted them to understand the gravity of the situation and to see the undeniable evidence before he took further action. The meeting was tense. His superior officers, though initially surprised, quickly recognized the severity of Jackson's behavior, especially given that the victim was their captain's own son. After reviewing the complaints in Jackson's file, they agreed that immediate disciplinary action was necessary. Jackson would be suspended pending an investigation, and an internal review would be conducted to address his history of misconduct. James left the meeting with a sense of grim satisfaction. Justice was in motion, but he knew this was only the beginning. He had to ensure that this investigation didn't become just another forgotten case. This was about more than one officer's actions. It was about holding the entire force accountable for how they treated the very people they had sworn to protect. Meanwhile, back at home, Michael and Karen tried to find comfort in the familiarity of their surroundings. Karen made him his favorite hot chocolate, hoping the warmth would soothe his nerves. She sat beside him, brushing his curls back from his forehead as he took slow, tentative sips. Her heart broke every time she looked at him, remembering the fear in his voice when he described the encounter. She wished she could protect him from ever experiencing something like that again. "Mom." Michael's voice was soft, hesitant. "Yes, sweetheart," Karen replied, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Do you think people will ever stop seeing me like that?" His voice wavered, a mix of sadness and frustration. Karen's heart clenched. She wished she could tell him that things would be different, that he would never have to face prejudice or suspicion again. But she couldn't lie to him. She could only promise to fight for him, to stand by him, and to teach him to be strong. "I don't know, Michael," she said honestly, her voice gentle but firm. "But I do know that you are brave and kind and full of potential. You are so much more than what that officer saw. And your father and I, we will keep fighting for a world that sees you for who you truly are." Michael nodded, a faint smile appearing as he looked down at his mug. His mother's words were comforting, even if they couldn't erase the pain entirely. He felt a sense of pride in his family, in the way his parents stood by him, ready to defend him and demand justice. They made him feel less alone, less vulnerable. Later that evening, James returned home, his expression weary but resolved. He knelt down in front of Michael, looking him in the eye with a quiet strength. "Son, I want you to know that Officer Jackson is being investigated. He's been suspended, and we're going to make sure he's held accountable." Michael's face brightened, a spark of hope igniting within him. "Really?" "Really," James confirmed, his voice filled with conviction. "This is far from over, but you have my word, Michael. We won't let this go." Michael hugged his father tightly, feeling a newfound sense of security. In that embrace, he understood that his family would always fight for him, that they would stand by him no matter what challenges they faced. That night, as he lay in bed, he felt a mixture of emotions: fear, anger, hope, and pride. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that justice wouldn't come easily. But he also knew he wasn't alone. With his family by his side, he felt stronger, more resilient. And as he drifted off to sleep, he made a silent vow to himself. No matter what, he would rise above this. He would be more than the fear and prejudice others placed upon him. He would stand tall with the courage and resilience his parents had instilled in him, and he would demand a world where everyone was seen and valued for who they truly were. The next morning, Michael woke up with a mix of relief and apprehension. While he felt comforted by his parents' support and his father's promise to take action, the memory of Officer Jackson's cold stare and the growling police dog was still vivid. He hadn't slept well, plagued by dreams of being chased down endless streets, always just out of reach of safety. But today was a new day, and he was determined not to let fear define him. Downstairs, he found his mother already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The smell of pancakes filled the air, and she greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice soothing. "I made your favorite." Michael managed a small smile, appreciating her efforts to make things feel normal, even though nothing really felt the same. "Thanks, Mom." As he took a seat at the table, his father entered, dressed in his police uniform. There was a sternness in Captain Johnson's face that Michael had rarely seen, and it reminded him of the strength his father carried, not only as a dad, but as a man of authority and principle. Michael admired his father deeply. He was everything Michael aspired to be: respected, kind, and brave. "Morning, champ," his dad greeted him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder before sitting across from him. "I spoke to my colleagues this morning, and we're moving forward with the investigation. Officer Jackson's actions won't go unchecked." Michael nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Thanks, Dad," he said, though there was a lingering worry. Do you think he'll really face consequences?" Captain Johnson took a deep breath, meeting his son's gaze with a steady look. "I can't promise you exactly how it will end, but I can promise you this, Michael. I'll do everything in my power to ensure that justice is served. We can't allow officers to misuse their authority. It goes against everything I believe in, everything I stand for." Karen placed a plate of pancakes in front of Michael, then joined them at the table, her expression both supportive and determined. "We're going to get through this together, Michael. And remember, no matter what happens, you have people who care about you, who will always stand by you." Michael felt his heart swell with gratitude. He wasn't alone in this fight. He had a family who believed in him, who were willing to stand up against injustice. With renewed resolve, he took a bite of his breakfast, vowing to carry himself with the same courage his parents displayed. After breakfast, James offered to drop Michael off at school. Usually, Michael would walk with friends or ride his bike, but today, his father wanted to make sure he felt safe. As they drove, the streets blurred past, and Michael found himself lost in thought, wondering how his classmates would react if they knew about the incident. He wasn't sure if he wanted anyone to know. What if they saw him differently? What if they saw him as a victim? When they arrived at school, James parked the car and turned to him. "Listen, son," he began, his tone gentle yet firm. "What happened doesn't define you. It was wrong, and it was unfair, but it doesn't change who you are or who you can be. Remember that." Michael nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thanks, Dad. I'll remember." As he stepped out of the car, he spotted his best friend, Andrew, waiting for him by the entrance. Andrew waved, grinning as usual, but his expression shifted to concern when he saw the look on Michael's face. "Hey, man. You good?" Andrew asked, walking over and giving him a friendly slap on the back. Michael forced a smile. "Yeah, just had a rough night." Andrew studied him for a moment, sensing that there was more to the story but choosing not to press. "Well, if you need anything, I'm here, all right. And guess what? Coach says we're getting new jerseys for the basketball team. They're gonna be awesome." The thought of the new jerseys brought a genuine smile to Michael's face. Basketball had always been his escape, his sanctuary. It was a place where he felt in control, where he could be himself without judgment. The idea of wearing a fresh new jersey, representing his team, filled him with a sense of pride and excitement. They headed to their first class together, and for a while, Michael managed to lose himself in the routine of school, listening to lectures, taking notes, and joking with Andrew. But every now and then, his mind would drift back to the previous night, to the feeling of the dog's hot breath, the officer's accusing glare, and the realization that his safety could be shattered so easily, even in his own neighborhood. Later that afternoon, as the school day came to an end, Michael was preparing to head to basketball practice when he noticed his father standing near the school's entrance. It was unusual for his dad to pick him up at school, and a pang of worry shot through him. Had something happened? Was there news about the investigation? As he approached, James gave him a reassuring nod. "Hey, Michael. Thought I'd come by and take you to practice today. I figured it might be nice to have some company." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. He appreciated his dad's presence, especially now. "Thanks, Dad. That'd be great." They drove in comfortable silence to the basketball court, the afternoon sun casting long shadows over the suburban streets. When they arrived, Michael saw his teammates warming up, laughing and joking as they passed the ball around. For a moment, he hesitated. Would they notice anything different about him? Would they sense the fear that had settled in his bones? James seemed to sense his hesitation. "Go on, son," he encouraged gently. "Basketball is your thing. Don't let anything take that away from you." Michael nodded, drawing strength from his father's words. He grabbed his basketball from the backseat and headed toward the court, joining his teammates in their warm-up drills. As he dribbled and practiced his shots, he felt the tension start to melt away. With each bounce of the ball, each successful shot, he reclaimed a part of himself, a piece of his confidence. Coach Williams blew the whistle, signaling the start of practice. "All right, boys, let's see what you've got. New jerseys are coming in next week, and I want to make sure you earn the right to wear them." The team cheered, and Michael found himself smiling, letting the thrill of the game push away the lingering darkness of the past day's events. For the next hour, he poured himself into practice, channeling his emotions into every move, every pass, every shot. By the end of the session, he was sweaty and tired, but a part of him felt lighter. After practice, as he walked back toward the car, he saw his father talking to Coach Williams. They seemed to be having a serious conversation, but when Michael approached, they both smiled, easing his worries. "Michael," Coach Williams said, clapping him on the shoulder, "your dad was just telling me about your dedication and hard work. I'm proud to have you on this team, son." "Thanks, Coach," Michael replied, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. He knew that his father's respect within the community was something earned through years of dedication and kindness, and Michael was grateful to have him as a role model. On the drive home, James glanced over at his son. "I spoke with your coach about what happened," he said quietly. "I wanted to make sure he understood why things might be a bit tough for you right now. He offered his support and said he'll keep an eye out for you." Michael nodded, grateful but feeling a bit vulnerable. "Thanks, Dad. I don't want people to look at me like I'm different, like I'm weak." James reached over, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Michael, people won't see you as weak. They'll see you as resilient, as someone who faced a difficult situation with courage. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger." Michael looked down, absorbing his father's words. He was beginning to understand that strength wasn't about avoiding hardship, but about how one responded to it. He thought of his father's calm determination, his mother's fierce love, and his own quiet resolve to rise above the fear and anger that had lingered in his heart. That evening after dinner, the Johnson family gathered in the living room. It was a routine they'd always had, talking about their day, sharing stories, and supporting each other. But tonight felt different. There was a shared understanding, an unspoken unity born from the trials they had faced together. Karen spoke up, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. "Michael, I want you to know that your father and I are so proud of you. You've shown a strength that goes beyond what we could have expected. And no matter what, we're here for you." James nodded, his face serious. "And remember, son, you're not alone in this. There are good people out there, people who believe in justice and fairness. This one officer doesn't define our entire community or our force. We'll keep working to make things right." Michael looked at his parents, feeling a surge of gratitude and love. In that moment, he realized that he was surrounded by people who would fight for him, who would lift him up when he fell down. He knew that this ordeal wasn't over, and that there would be days when the memory haunted him. But he also knew he had a foundation of love and support that nothing could shake. As he went to bed that night, Michael felt a quiet strength settle within him. He understood that while fear and injustice had cast a shadow over his life, it hadn't diminished the light within him. With his family's support, he would face whatever challenges came his way, and he would carry the lessons of resilience, kindness, and courage with him, ready to step into the world with his head held high. In the days following the incident, life continued, but for Michael, everything felt different. School was still school, basketball practice was still practice, and his friends were still his friends. But a part of him carried a weight that wasn't there before, a quiet, lingering anxiety, a fear that crept into his mind in moments of silence. He found himself glancing over at his shoulder more often, especially when he saw a police car or an unfamiliar face. At home, his parents did their best to keep things normal. His mother, Karen, continued to make his favorite meals and share encouraging words, while his father, Captain James Johnson, juggled his responsibilities at the station with his determination to see justice served. The investigation into Officer Jackson's actions was underway, but the process was slow. James was doing everything in his power to push it forward, meeting with the Internal Affairs Department, gathering witness statements, and ensuring the case was treated with the seriousness it deserved. One evening, after a long day at school, Michael sat on his bed, staring out the window. The sky was painted with shades of purple and orange as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. He felt a strange mix of anger and sadness bubbling up inside him. Anger at the unfairness of what had happened, and sadness at the loss of the simple peace he used to feel walking these streets. A knock on his bedroom door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting his mother. Instead, his father stepped in, holding 2 cups of steaming hot chocolate. He gave Michael a small smile, one that was both reassuring and understanding, and handed him a cup before sitting beside him on the bed. "Hot chocolate always helps," James said, taking a sip. "Your mom's recipe with extra marshmallows." Michael managed a faint smile as he took a sip, savoring the warmth and sweetness. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun dip lower on the horizon. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, son," James began, his voice low and thoughtful. "What happened? It's something no one should have to experience, especially not a kid." Michael looked down at his cup, swirling the marshmallows around. "Dad, why did he do it? Why did Officer Jackson treat me like that? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just coming home from practice." James sighed, his expression darkening. He had thought about this question countless times since the incident. As a father, he wanted to give Michael an answer that would make everything make sense, but as a police officer, he knew that sometimes there simply wasn't a satisfying explanation for such prejudice. There are some people, Michael, who let fear or ignorance cloud their judgment. They see differences as something to be suspicious of, rather than something to respect. And some people, when given power, misuse it because they feel it makes them superior. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Officer Jackson was wrong. He saw something in you that he wrongly associated with danger. And that's on him, not on you. Michael's brow furrowed as he processed his father's words. "But you're a police officer too. And you're nothing like him. Why are some officers like that?" James placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "Michael, I became a police officer to make a difference, to protect people, and to serve my community with integrity. But not everyone sees the job the same way. Some officers let their biases get in the way of their duty. That's why people like me, and people like you, need to stand up against that kind of behavior. We need to show the world that there's a different way." Michael nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of frustration and admiration for his father. He had always looked up to him, but now, after seeing the ugliness that could exist within the same profession, his respect had deepened. His father wasn't just a hero because he wore a uniform. He was a hero because he chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard. After a few moments, James spoke again, his tone more serious. "Michael, I want you to know that we're going to a community meeting tonight. It's a gathering where people can share their concerns and talk about issues that affect our neighborhood. I want you to come with me." Michael's eyes widened in surprise. "You want me to come?" "Yes," James said, nodding. "Your voice matters, Michael. People need to hear your story. They need to understand that this kind of behavior affects real people, real families. And I think it'll help you too. It's a chance to let go of some of that anger and to show people who you are, a strong, courageous young man who deserves respect." Michael thought about it, the idea both intimidating and empowering. He had never spoken in front of a crowd before, and he wasn't sure he wanted to relive the experience. But the thought of his story helping others, of standing up for himself and others who might be going through similar situations, gave him a sense of purpose. "Okay," he agreed, his voice steady. "I'll go." Later that evening, they arrived at the community center. The building was bustling with people from all walks of life: neighbors, families, community leaders, and a few off-duty police officers who had come to listen and support. The air was filled with a buzz of anticipation, and as they entered the main hall, Michael felt a surge of nervousness. His father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, guiding him to a seat near the front. The meeting began with the local community organizer, Mrs. Ramirez, welcoming everyone and addressing the recent concerns about policing and safety in the neighborhood. She spoke with passion, her voice echoing through the hall, reminding everyone of the importance of unity and understanding. As she spoke, Michael noticed that a few people glanced in his direction, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and empathy. He realized that word of the incident had spread, and while part of him wanted to shrink away, another part of him felt a surge of pride. These people were here to listen, to learn, and he had a chance to be heard. When it was his turn to speak, James stood up, introducing himself and his son. His voice was calm, but laced with emotion as he explained what had happened. He didn't sugarcoat it or downplay the severity. He told the truth, letting the crowd understand the fear and vulnerability Michael had felt. Finally, James turned to Michael, giving him an encouraging nod. Michael took a deep breath, standing before the crowd with his heart pounding in his chest. He felt the weight of all the eyes on him, but he also felt the support radiating from his father beside him. I was just walking home from basketball practice," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "It was late, and I was tired, but I wasn't scared. This is my neighborhood. I know these streets. But then, this police officer, he stopped me, and it felt like he was looking at me like I'd done something wrong." He paused, glancing at his father, who nodded, urging him to continue. "He made me empty my pockets. He didn't believe me when I told him I was just going home. And then, he let his dog go on me. I didn't do anything wrong, but I was so scared. I thought it was going to hurt me." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the audience. He could see the impact his story was having. The way people's faces softened, some with tears in their eyes, others with expressions of anger and determination. He realized, in that moment, that sharing his experience was not only healing for him, but was opening the eyes of those who might not have fully understood what it was like to face such prejudice. Mrs. Ramirez spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Michael, for your bravery in sharing that with us. It's a reminder of the challenges many people in our community face, even in places they should feel safe. And it's a call to action for all of us, to stand up for each other and demand change." As the meeting continued, others shared their own stories, their own experiences with injustice and prejudice. Some people discussed ways to increase accountability within the police force, suggesting community-based training programs and regular forums for open dialogue between officers and residents. Others spoke about the need for empathy, for understanding, and for building a community where everyone felt safe and respected. By the end of the meeting, Michael felt a sense of relief, a lightness that he hadn't felt since the incident. He realized that his story had the power to spark change, to open minds, and inspire others to stand up for what was right. And in turn, he felt a renewed sense of pride in himself, in his father, and in his community. On the way home, James looked at him with pride. "I'm proud of you, son. It takes courage to speak out, to stand up for yourself and for others. You've already made a difference tonight." Michael smiled, feeling a newfound strength in his heart. "Thanks, Dad. I think I understand now. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's right, Michael. It's about creating a better future for everyone. And you've taken the first step." As they pulled into their driveway, Michael felt a quiet resolve settle within him. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew that he was no longer alone in facing them. With his family, his community, and his own voice, he was ready to stand up, to fight for justice, and to help build a world where everyone could walk their streets in peace. In the weeks following the community meeting, Michael's story continued to ripple through the neighborhood and beyond. News of the incident spread, reaching local newspapers and even making headlines on social media. Community leaders, activists, and concerned citizens rallied around Michael and his family, demanding accountability and systemic change within the police force. Captain James Johnson found himself juggling his roles as both a father and a police officer. As Michael's father, he was determined to support his son, to be there for him every step of the way as they navigated the complex emotions and challenges that arose from the incident. But as a police officer, he was equally committed to addressing the larger issues within his department. The investigation into Officer Jackson's actions was underway, but James knew that the problem extended far beyond one individual. This was about challenging the entire culture that had allowed someone like Jackson to act with such blatant prejudice. One afternoon, James was called into a meeting with the police chief and other senior officers to discuss the findings of the internal investigation. He felt a sense of grim anticipation as he entered the room, wondering if this would finally be the turning point they needed. The room was filled with a tense silence as they reviewed the details of the investigation. Officer Jackson's record was laid bare, a troubling pattern of complaints about his conduct, especially in interactions with young men of color. As the chief flipped through the file, his expression grew darker. "This isn't the first time we've seen complaints like this against Jackson," he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "We've been getting reports for years, but nothing concrete enough to hold him accountable. Until now." James's jaw tightened as he listened. He couldn't believe that such behavior had gone unchecked for so long. He felt a swell of anger, not just for his son, but for every young person who had ever felt the sting of discrimination and mistreatment by someone sworn to protect them. "What do you propose we do, Captain Johnson?" one of the senior officers asked, his tone indicating genuine interest. "Your perspective is invaluable here, given that you've seen both sides, as a father of someone who was affected, and as a leader within this department." James took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he spoke. "We need real reform. This isn't just about firing one bad officer. It's about rebuilding trust with the community. We need to establish regular training that focuses on empathy, cultural sensitivity, and recognizing implicit bias. We need a system that holds officers accountable when they overstep their boundaries. And most importantly, we need to work hand in hand with our community, ensuring that they feel heard and respected." The chief nodded thoughtfully, his fingers tapping against the table. "I agree, Captain. It's clear that we need to take a hard look at our practices and make changes, starting with this case." After the meeting, James left the station with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that the path ahead would be difficult. Reforming a police department wasn't something that happened overnight. But he also knew that he had to try. For Michael, for his family, and for every person who had ever felt unsafe in their own neighborhood. Meanwhile, at school, Michael was beginning to find his own way of processing everything that had happened. The community meeting had given him a sense of empowerment, a chance to share his story and connect with others who understood his struggle. His friends, especially Andrew, rallied around him, offering support and encouragement. They would hang out after school, shooting hoops, laughing, and for brief moments, things almost felt normal again. One afternoon, while Michael and Andrew were walking home from practice, they noticed a group of younger kids playing basketball at the local park. The boys couldn't have been older than 7 or 8, their laughter ringing out as they dribbled and took clumsy shots. Michael watched them with a smile, remembering when he was that age, just learning how to handle a basketball, dreaming of making the perfect shot. "Hey, isn't that your favorite court?" Andrew asked, nodding toward the kids. "I remember you used to spend hours out here." "Yeah," Michael replied, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "I guess I grew up on this court." As they watched, one of the kids tripped, falling to the ground with a thud. He looked up, his face contorting in frustration as he struggled to hold back tears. Michael felt a pang of sympathy, remembering how intense those moments could feel at that age. Without a second thought, he jogged over, kneeling down beside the boy. "You okay?" Michael asked gently, offering his hand to help him up. The boy sniffled, rubbing his eyes as he took Michael's hand. "Yeah, I just wanted to make the shot, but I keep messing up." Michael smiled, nodding with understanding. "It takes practice. I missed a lot of shots when I was learning too. But you know what? Every time you miss, you get a little closer to making it. Want me to show you a trick?" The boy's eyes lit up with hope, and he nodded eagerly. Michael showed him a few techniques, helping him with his stance and explaining how to keep his focus on the basket. Andrew joined in, offering encouragement, and soon the other kids gathered around, watching as Michael patiently coached the young boy. When the boy finally made the shot, his face broke into a beaming smile, and the other kids cheered. As they walked home afterward, Andrew nudged Michael, grinning. "Look at you, Coach Michael. You're pretty good at this, you know." Michael chuckled, feeling the warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt in a while. "Yeah, it felt good. I guess I just wanted to show him that he didn't have to give up, that he was stronger than he thought." Andrew nodded, his expression turning serious. "You know, you're pretty strong yourself, Michael. Everything you went through. Not everyone could handle that. But you're still here, still helping other people. That's something to be proud of." Michael thought about his friend's words, a sense of pride filling him. Maybe, just maybe, he could take what he had gone through and turn it into something positive. Maybe he could inspire others to stand up for themselves, to believe in their own strength, even in the face of fear and prejudice. When he got home, his mother was waiting for him in the kitchen, a warm smile on her face. "How was practice?" she asked as she handed him a snack. "It was good, Mom," he replied, taking a bite. "And I met some younger kids at the park. I showed them a few tricks with the basketball." Karen's smile grew wider. "That's wonderful, Michael. You have such a kind heart. Those kids are lucky to have you as a role model." As he finished his snack, Michael felt an idea forming in his mind, a way he could give back, a way he could turn his experience into something that might help others. He knew it was ambitious, but he also knew that his family would support him. "Mom," he began, his voice hesitant but excited. Do you think I could start a program for kids in the community? Like a basketball clinic or something. A place where they could learn to play, but also learn about respect, resilience, and how to handle tough situations." Karen's eyes sparkled with pride and excitement. "Michael, that's a wonderful idea. I think it would be amazing. And I know your father would be thrilled to help too." Over the next few weeks, with the help of his parents, Michael began to bring his idea to life. His father helped him connect with local community centers, and his mother reached out to other parents, explaining the program's purpose. They called it Hoops for Hope, a basketball clinic that focused not only on teaching kids how to play but on building character, fostering respect, and teaching the importance of standing up for what's right. The first day of the clinic was a mix of nerves and excitement. Dozens of kids showed up, some as young as 5 and others in their early teens, each one eager to learn. Michael and his friends, along with a few adult volunteers, guided the kids through drills, teaching them the basics of dribbling, shooting, and passing. But they also took time to talk about the values that the clinic stood for: courage, kindness, and resilience. During one of the sessions, Michael gathered the kids around, sharing his own story in a way they could understand. He told them about a time when he felt scared and unfairly treated, but also about how he found strength through his family, his friends, and his community. "If there's one thing I want you all to remember," he said, looking at each child's eager face, "it's that you're stronger than you think. No matter what anyone says or does, you have the power to keep going, to stand up for yourself and others. And there's always someone who will have your back." The kids listened intently, some nodding, others looking thoughtful. Michael could see that his words were making an impact, that they were absorbing the lesson he had learned through his own hardship. As the weeks went by, Hoops for Hope grew, drawing more kids from neighboring areas. It became a place of refuge and empowerment, a place where young people could learn not only about basketball, but about respect, courage, and community. Michael became a role model, someone they looked up to, not just because of his skills on the court, but because of the strength and kindness he demonstrated. And through it all, Michael felt himself healing. The fear and anger from the incident with Officer Jackson slowly faded, replaced by a sense of purpose and pride. He was transforming his pain into power, using his experience to make a difference in the lives of others. One evening, as he was wrapping up a session, his father approached him with a proud smile. "I'm so proud of you, Michael. You've taken something painful and turned it into something beautiful. You're helping to build a better future, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you." Michael looked up at his dad, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you and Mom. You both showed me what it means to be strong." As they walked home together, Michael felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew that life wouldn't always be easy, that there would be more challenges ahead. But he also knew that he had the strength to face them, to rise above, and to inspire others to do the same. And in that moment, he realized that he was no longer defined by the incident with Officer Jackson. He was defined by how he had chosen to respond, by the courage and resilience he had discovered within himself. He had become more than a survivor. He had become a leader, a mentor, and a symbol of hope for his community. Months had passed since the night that had changed everything for Michael and his family. The initial shock and fear had faded, replaced by a profound sense of resilience, purpose, and community. Michael had taken what was a deeply traumatic experience and transformed it into an opportunity not only to grow himself but to help others. Through his basketball program, Hoops for Hope, he had become a source of inspiration, an example of strength and perseverance for countless young kids in his neighborhood. The program had grown steadily, and Hoops for Hope had become a central part of the community. Every Saturday morning, the local community center's gym was filled with the laughter, cheers, and excited voices of kids of all ages. The parents came to watch, often staying to volunteer or to chat with each other, creating a strong sense of unity among the families. Michael's mother, Karen, had even started hosting a parent support circle in one of the classrooms, giving the parents a safe space to discuss their concerns and experiences, often around the themes of safety, respect, and justice. Meanwhile, Captain James Johnson was spearheading significant changes within the police department. After the internal investigation into Officer Jackson's behavior, the department had made the decision to terminate him. The investigation had revealed a history of misconduct, and with the mounting public pressure, the police force had been forced to confront the deeper issues within their ranks. But for James, firing one problematic officer wasn't enough. He wanted real change. James worked tirelessly to implement new training programs that focused on cultural sensitivity, empathy, and de-escalation techniques. He partnered with community leaders to establish regular town halls where officers and residents could discuss their concerns openly and honestly. The goal was to bridge the gap, to foster understanding and trust. He knew it would be a long process, but he was determined to make the police department a true ally to the community. One sunny Saturday morning, Michael arrived at the community center early to prepare for the day's basketball clinic. He was setting up cones for the drills when he noticed a familiar face walking toward him. Andre, his best friend. But Andrew wasn't alone. Beside him was a small, shy-looking boy with big eyes and a hesitant smile. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, his tiny frame dwarfed by an oversized hoodie. Michael smiled, waving them over. "Hey, Andre. Who's your friend?" Andrew grinned, ruffling the little boy's hair. "This is Jalen. He's my neighbor's cousin. He wanted to come check out Hoops for Hope." Jalen looked up at Michael, a hint of nervousness in his eyes. I've never played basketball before," he said softly, almost apologetically. Michael knelt down to Jalen's eye level, giving him a reassuring smile. "Well, you're in the right place, Jalen. Here, it doesn't matter if you're the best or the worst. All that matters is that you try your best and have fun. We're all here to learn together." Jalen's face lit up, and he nodded eagerly. Michael handed him a basketball, showing him how to hold it properly and giving him a few pointers on dribbling. As the other kids arrived, Michael made sure to keep an eye on Jalen, watching as he slowly gained confidence, his initial shyness fading with each successful dribble and every little accomplishment on the court. As the clinic went on, Michael felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. Watching these kids, he saw bits of himself in each of them. Their determination, their resilience, their desire to be seen and valued. He realized that Hoops for Hope wasn't just about basketball. It was about giving these kids a space where they could feel safe, respected, and empowered. A place where they could learn not just the game, but lessons about self-worth, confidence, and community. After practice ended and the kids were gathering their things to head home, Michael noticed Jalen lingering near the court, staring at the basketball in his hands with a sense of wonder. Michael walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Did you have fun today, Jalen?" Jalen looked up at him, his face breaking into a wide smile. "Yeah, I didn't think I'd be any good, but I did okay, right?" Michael chuckled. "You did better than okay. You did great. And if you keep practicing, you'll get even better." Jalen hugged the basketball tightly, looking up at Michael with admiration. Do you think I could come back next week?" "Of course. Hoops for Hope is open to everyone. We'd love to have you back." As Jalen ran off to catch up with Andre, Michael felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was what he had fought for, turning his own pain into something that could bring joy and hope to others. He was reminded of the promise he had made to himself months ago, that he would not let his fear define him. Instead, he had chosen to channel that experience into making a difference, creating a space where kids like Jalen could grow, thrive, and believe in themselves. Later that evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Karen brought up the idea of organizing a Hoops for Hope community event. "We could invite families, have some food, music, maybe even a little award ceremony for the kids. It could be a great way to celebrate everything you've built here, Michael." Michael's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing, Mom. We could give out certificates for things like Most Improved or Best Team Player. The kids would love it." James nodded, smiling at his son with pride. "And it would be a great opportunity for the community to see the positive impact Hoops for Hope is having. People need to see the good that can come out of moments of adversity." Over the next few weeks, the Johnson family worked tirelessly to organize the event. Karen reached out to local businesses to sponsor refreshments and prizes, while James helped secure the community center and arrange for extra seating. Michael and his friends made posters and decorations, spreading the word to all the families involved in the program. When the day of the event finally arrived, the community center was buzzing with excitement. Families poured in, the air filled with laughter, music, and the delicious smell of grilled food. The gym had been transformed, decorated with banners that read, "Hoops for Hope," celebrating strength, community, and growth. A stage was set up at one end, and rows of chairs filled the rest of the space, with a small area reserved for kids to play and practice their shots. As the ceremony began, James took the stage to welcome everyone. He spoke about the importance of community, of resilience, and of standing up against injustice. He expressed his gratitude for the support they had received, acknowledging the strength and courage of the young people in the program and their families. Then it was Michael's turn to speak. He stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. He felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, but when he saw the familiar, encouraging faces of his friends, family, and the kids from Hoops for Hope, he felt his confidence solidify. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," he began, his voice steady and clear. Hoops for Hope started as a simple basketball clinic, but it's become so much more than that. It's a place where we come together, where we learn not only about basketball, but about believing in ourselves and each other. He looked at the kids seated in the front row, their eager faces shining with admiration and respect. "Each of you is stronger than you know. Each of you has something special to offer this world. I hope that when you come to Hoops for Hope, you feel that strength within you, and I hope you carry it with you wherever you go." The crowd broke into applause, and Michael felt a surge of pride and gratitude. As he stepped down from the podium, he was greeted with hugs, high fives, and words of encouragement from friends, family, and members of the community. The kids swarmed him, their excitement palpable as they shared their dreams of becoming great basketball players, just like him. The event continued with games, music, and laughter. The kids played pickup games, the parents chatted, and everyone shared in the joy and unity that Hoops for Hope had fostered. For Michael, it was a celebration not only of the program's success, but of his own journey, one that had taken him from fear and uncertainty to empowerment and purpose. As the evening wound down, Michael found a quiet moment with his father, standing together on the edge of the court. They watched as the last few families gathered their things, the gym slowly emptying as the event came to an end. "I'm so proud of you, Michael," James said, his voice filled with emotion. "What you've done here, it's incredible. You took something painful, something unfair, and turned it into something beautiful." Michael looked up at his father, his heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you and Mom. You both believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." James placed a hand on his shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "That's what family does, son. We lift each other up, no matter what. And you've lifted up this entire community. You've shown everyone what it means to be resilient, to fight for what's right." As they left the gym that night, Michael felt a sense of peace and fulfillment he had never known before. He knew that Hoops for Hope was only the beginning, that there was so much more he wanted to do, so many more ways he wanted to make a difference. He felt strong, supported, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In his heart, he knew he had been changed by what he had endured, but he also knew that he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He was no longer just a boy who had experienced injustice. He was a young man who had chosen to rise above it, to make a lasting impact, to build something that would uplift others. And as he looked up at the night sky, he made a silent vow to himself. He would continue to use his voice, his strength, and his heart to inspire others. He would keep fighting for a world where every child could walk home without fear, where every person could be respected and valued. Because that, he realized, was the true meaning of hope.